Right. So there are several ways in which we now have several tools that we have to test for COVID-19. One way is to test whether the virus is there by looking at it genetically. Is its genetic information present in whatever sample we take? And that's what we do when we do rtPCR. We look for the RNA of the virus to see if that's present. It doesn't tell us that it's live virus. It just tells us that the genetic material of the virus is present and gives us an idea of how much of it is there. The other two tests, there's an antigen test. That's brand new. The FDA just approved it. What that does is it looks for the protein produced by the virus, and it allows us to detect that. There are unique proteins that the virus makes. So in a way, it gives us the same kind of information as an rtPCR test because it tells us about the virus itself being present in the sample. It tells us about the proteins of that virus being present in the sample. The last type of test is the antibody test, and that is not a test for the virus itself. Instead, what you're looking for is the body's reaction to that virus. And it's a particular kind of reaction among the many different reactions that our body has. So an antibody test looks for immunoglobulins. It can look for IgG, IgM, or IgA, or two of those at the same time. Several of the antibody tests look at IgM and IgG. And these are important differences for us medically because it gives us a clue as to when perhaps someone was infected and started to develop antibodies. It might be able to do that. So the big difference is the antigen test is a lot less expensive than a PCR test. And both of those tell us about the presence of the virus. So the key difference is there are two ways now to look for the presence of the virus. One is to look for its genetic material, and the second is to look for something produced by that genetic material, which is the protein of the virus. The third way to identify what might be going on in a population with COVID-19 is to look at what the body does if it's seen the virus, and those are antibody tests. So the antigen test that just came out is very interesting because it's faster and less expensive and less challenging to do than rtPCR, but it's not as sensitive as the rtPCR test. So if we can get an antigen test that is as specific and as sensitive as the rtPCR, then we're going to have something that can very easily be used to cohort individuals. And this becomes very important when we're talking about having to have groups of people together for various reasons. So everyone is quite concerned about the situation with COVID-19 intermixing with the situation of horrific storms, in particular hurricanes, which can drive people out of their nice sheltered in place locations of their homes. And we certainly do not want to be mixing individuals who may be harboring virus and not know it, asymptomatic carriers, with individuals who have not been exposed to the virus. Our current estimates here in South Florida is about, based on a study, about 6% of the population is positive. And if that is the case, and we have no idea if that's going to expand between now and the time that we may or may not face a hurricane, we absolutely have to be very, very careful about mixing those individuals. So we're looking at a variety of solutions, including changing some of our rules and regulations, our timing for when we do evacuations, our perhaps invoking certain acts so that we might be able to use hotels as shelters so that we can have individuals in their home units sheltered independently so that we don't have to mix them, or perhaps applying some of these newer diagnostic techniques in order to cohort individuals based on their positivity for COVID-19. In addition, we have the challenge of pets, which are always a little bit of a challenge for hurricanes, now compounded because we are aware that cats in particular can become ill with COVID. And moreover, cats have now been demonstrated to be able to cause COVID-19 in other cats. A direct cat-to-cat transmission has been shown, and that's a complication for sheltering families who have pets. Not to mention even someone's dog, even though they're not as susceptible, generally speaking, as cats to COVID, we don't need to mix people's dogs together in shelters. We need to be very, very careful about how exactly we do that. So the pet situation has become more complicated. The human situation has become more complicated. And we are setting up task force right now in order to find answers to the various questions that we have as to how exactly we're going to manage this. So I have a moderate level of concern, and my concern is going to vary depending on how responsive our population is and how cooperative our population is in terms of all the rules and regulations that we have very carefully created in order to allow businesses to open to a restricted degree. If people can cooperate with those, then the cohorts that develop will be fewer. There's always the problem that some individual may be a super spreader. We've seen that in other countries, and when you have a super spreader, then some of these solutions go a little bit out the window, and you may have an explosion of cases. One of the things that we're doing to try and minimize that is that we are requiring businesses to have teams that meet daily, and these daily teams are supposed to log a whole set of informations every day, including the health of their employees. So what we're trying to minimize, the way we're trying to minimize the concern as much as we can, is to capture something happening as quickly as possible. And that's why we've asked these businesses to create these teams that every single day log what happens and explore what's going on, and making sure that they're still following, that they followed the checklist, because we're giving these businesses checklists that they're supposed to submit before they open. And in addition to submitting it before they open, they should use those checklists to make sure that they're still in compliance with all the various factors that we want them to do. And the task forces, one of the key things is for them to identify for the county anytime that there is a shift in what's going on, and increase in absenteeism among their employees, as well as the reporting of COVID positivity or being a person of interest for COVID.